The gun barrel gleamed under fluorescent lights, 3 inches from Cassidy's face. Screams erupted across Sterling's diner as Tommy's finger tightened on the trigger, his hand trembling with desperation and rage. Then Marcus Whitfield rose from table 3, his $800 suit catching everyone's attention as he stepped between the weapon and the waitress, and spoke 5 impossible words. "Tommy, put the gun down." Marcus didn't know that Cassidy recognized the gunman from case file 847, a file that could destroy him. And in 48 hours, one of them would be under federal investigation. But first, let me show you how we got here. Before I reveal what happened next, drop below. Would you risk your life for a stranger or protect yourself first? Hit subscribe. This story has 3 twists you won't see coming. Also, drop your city so I know where my truth seekers are watching from. But before that gun was pointed, before Marcus stood up, before everything shattered, let me show you who Cassidy Morgan really was. It was 7:15 p.m. that same Friday evening at Sterling's Diner, and the place hummed with its usual chaotic rhythm. The rich aroma of fresh brewed coffee mingled with sizzling bacon grease on the griddle, creating that distinctly American diner smell that somehow meant comfort and exhaustion in equal measure. Every time the front door swung open, bitter November wind cut through the warmth, carrying the sharp scent of incoming snow. Cassidy moved through the Friday dinner rush like a conductor orchestrating a symphony. Table 4, 2 burgers, 1 medium rare, 1 well done, extra pickles on the side, coffee black for him, decaf with cream for her. Table 7, Greek salad, dressing on the side, allergic to onions. Table 9, the regular who always ordered the usual, which she'd memorized as a Reuben sandwich, no Thousand Island, extra sauerkraut, and a chocolate milkshake. She never wrote anything down. Didn't need to. At table 6, elderly Mr. Patterson was signing his credit card receipt when Cassidy approached. He looked up, his hands moving in deliberate gestures. She responded fluently in American Sign Language. "Same time next week? Your grandson joining you?" His weathered face broke into a smile as he signed back. "You remember everything." She did. It was both her gift and her curse. In the back corner booth, 2 businessmen argued over a contract dispute. One insisted the other had violated their non-compete agreement. Cassidy refilled their coffee and couldn't help herself. Actually, Illinois non-compete clauses are only enforceable if they're reasonable in duration, geographic scope, and protect legitimate business interests. What you're describing wouldn't hold up in court. Both men stared at her. She smiled politely and moved on, internally cursing herself for the slip. By 9 p.m., her feet ached in the worn sneakers she'd resoled twice because new ones weren't in the budget. During her break, she sat in the staff room and pulled out her phone. Bank account, $347.18. Rent due in 4 days, $900. The student loan statement peeked out from her bag. $127, 000 in debt for a law degree she no longer used. Ruby, the night manager, poked her head in. "You okay, honey?" "Always am," Cassidy lied. Her locker stood open, and inside, beneath her spare uniform and emergency tampons, sat a worn leather portfolio. She hadn't opened it in 18 months, but she couldn't throw it away either. Inside were case files from her former life, evidence of things powerful people wanted buried. Sometimes she wondered if keeping it made her brave or stupid. "Cassidy, table 3 needs to be set up," Ruby called. "We've got a VIP coming in at 9:30. Table 3, the back corner, the discretion table, where Chicago's powerful came when they wanted privacy. Cassidy stood, smoothed her apron, and pushed the portfolio to the back of her locker. That life was over. She was just a waitress now, invisible, safe. The griddle hissed behind her. The door chimed as another customer entered, bringing another blast of cold air. The evening shift continued, ordinary and unremarkable. She had no idea that in less than an hour, a gun would be pointed at her face, and the choice to remain invisible would be taken away forever. At exactly 9:30 p.m., the black Mercedes S-Class pulled up outside Sterling's diner, its polished exterior reflecting the neon sign like liquid obsidian. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, every staff member noticed. You always noticed when Marcus Whitfield arrived. Ruby straightened her manager's vest and hurried to table 3, wiping it down for the third time even though it was already spotless. The busboy Miguel carefully positioned the chair at the perfect angle. Other servers suddenly found reasons to be in the back. Marcus stepped through the door, and the temperature in the room seemed to shift. Not that he was physically imposing. He stood maybe 5 feet 10 inches, lean build, salt and pepper hair styled with precision. But something about the way he moved, the way his gray eyes assessed every detail with the efficiency of a man who calculated risk for a living, commanded space. His suit was charcoal Tom Ford, perfectly tailored, probably worth more than Cassidy made in 3 months. The watch on his wrist, a Patek Philippe, caught the light as he unbuttoned his coat. Every movement was controlled, deliberate, as the spontaneity was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Mr. Whitfield, table 3 is ready for you," Ruby said, her voice pitching slightly higher than normal. "Thank you, Ruby." He handed her his coat. "How's your mother doing? Is the treatment helping?" Ruby blinked, surprised he remembered. "Better, actually. Thank you for asking." As he walked to his table, Miguel approached with a water glass. "Good evening, Mr. Whitfield." "Miguel, how was your citizenship test?" The young man's face lit up. "I passed, sir. Last week." "Congratulations." Marcus handed him a folded bill. Cassidy glimpsed a $100 note. "Celebrate properly." This was the dance Marcus performed every visit. Measured kindness, personal details remembered, generosity displayed. It created loyalty. It created witnesses who would say, "He's actually a nice guy." Cassidy had seen this type before. He settled into table 3, immediately pulling out his phone. His conversation carried just far enough for nearby tables to hear. "Yes, the Foundation Gala is confirmed for December 15th. We're projecting $2 million for the Children's Hospital. No, I want all the board members there. This is about giving back to Chicago." Ruby gestured for Cassidy to take his order. She approached with her notepad, though she never actually needed it. "Good evening. What can I get you?" Marcus looked up, and for a moment his businessman facade slipped. He looked tired. More than tired, haunted. Dark circles under his eyes that expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. His jaw was clenched, so tight she could see the muscle jumping. "Black coffee. Nothing else. Just coffee." She couldn't help the slight concern in her voice. It was 9:30 p.m. No one ordered just coffee unless they were preparing for a long, sleepless night. Just coffee. He returned to his phone, effectively dismissing her. As Cassidy walked back to the counter, she noted the details her legal training had taught her to catalog. His left hand trembled slightly when he typed. His eyes kept darting to the door. The phone call about charity was too perfectly timed, too perfectly pitched for public consumption. Marcus Whitfield was either expecting something or dreading something. In 22 minutes, she'd find out which. At 9:52 p.m., the front door of Sterling's diner exploded inward. The man wore a black ski mask and a dark hoodie, and in his right hand he gripped a 9mm pistol that looked too large, too real, too impossible for this ordinary Friday night. Everyone on the ground. Now, the diner erupted into chaos. A woman screamed. Coffee mugs shattered against tile. A businessman dove under his table so fast his laptop crashed to the floor. The cook ducked behind the counter, hands raised. I said, "Get down." The gunman's voice cracked with desperation and rage, a dangerous combination. Cassidy's body froze. Her psychology professor in college had talked about the freeze response, how some people's nervous systems shut down in crisis. She'd always imagined she'd be the type to fight or flee. Instead, she stood paralyzed, coffee pot still in her hand, watching the scene unfold like she was underwater. The gunman moved to the register, weapon trained on Ruby. "Open it. All the cash in the bag. Now." Ruby's hands shook so badly she couldn't work the register. The drawer stuck. She tried again. I'm trying, please." "Faster." He pressed the gun against the counter, and the bang of metal on laminate made everyone flinch. Cassidy's eyes scanned the room on autopilot. 18 customers. 3 staff members, including her, multiple exits. Her legal training cataloged details. The robber's hands trembled. His stance was wrong for someone trained with weapons. His voice kept cracking. This wasn't a professional. This was someone desperate. The registered drawer finally opened. Ruby dumped bills into the plastic bag with shaking hands, 20s, 10s, 5s, the meager Friday night deposit that maybe totaled $800. Then Cassidy saw them. Booth 2, near the front door. A young woman, maybe 25, with a little girl in her lap. The child was crying, face buried in her mother's shoulder. The mother's eyes were wide with terror, her body angled as if to shield her daughter. But she was frozen in place. If the gunman turned toward the door, Cassidy's body moved before her mind could stop it. She set down the coffee pot and walked toward booth 2. Time felt strange, elastic. Each step took forever and no time at all. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning out the sounds of crying and shouting. "Miss, please don't," Ruby's voice. The gunman spun toward the movement, toward Cassidy. I said, "Stay down." Cassidy reached the booth and positioned herself between the man with the gun and the mother and child. She didn't crouch, didn't raise her hands, just stood there, creating a human barrier. "Move." The gunman's voice pitched higher. The weapon swung toward her face. This close, she could see everything. The gun's barrel impossibly dark. His brown eyes visible through the mask's openings, bloodshot and wild. The specific sound of the safety clicking off, a small mechanical click that meant the difference between threat and execution. Fear flooded her system with crystal clarity. Metallic taste coating her tongue. Adrenaline. High-pitched ringing in her ears. Cold sweat breaking across her neck and back. Her hands, hanging at her sides, began to shake. Some distant part of her brain registered that she might die in the next 3 seconds, wearing a coffee-stained apron, making $2.13 an hour plus tips. The gunman's finger moved to the trigger. His hand trembled. I said, "Move." Then Marcus Whitfield stood up from table 3. The movement was slow, deliberate. His chair scraped against the tile floor, the sound cutting through the chaos like a gunshot. Every eye in the diner turned toward him. He didn't raise his hands, didn't show fear. He simply stood, his expensive suit and perfect posture, creating an island of calm in the pandemonium. He stepped away from his table, walked toward the gunman, walked toward Cassidy, and the gun pointed at her face. 6 feet away, 5 feet, 4. The silence that descended was absolute. Even the little girl stopped crying. Marcus stepped directly between Cassidy and the weapon, his body now the barrier, his chest 6 inches from the gun barrel. Then he spoke, and his voice was quiet, certain, and laced with something that sounded almost like grief. "Tommy, put the gun down." The gunman froze. The name hit him like a physical blow. I said, "Put it down, son." Don't call me that." The gunman's voice broke. The mask shifted as he shook his head violently. The edge caught on his jaw, sliding up just enough to reveal his face. And Cassidy saw him. Really saw him. Her mind, trained by 3 years of criminal defense work, cataloged the features faster than conscious thought. The thin scar above his left eyebrow, the way his nose bent slightly to the right from an old break, the specific shade of brown in his desperate eyes. Thomas Brennan, case file 847. 3 years ago, the contractor who sued Whitfield Capital Management for contract fraud. The case that was dropped 48 hours before trial. The case that haunted her for a year after she left law. Her internal monologue crystallized into one clear thought. Oh God, Marcus knows him. Marcus destroyed him. This wasn't a random robbery. What she didn't know, Marcus's heroic moment was actually self-preservation. What he didn't know, she remembered everything. The sirens arrived within 4 minutes. Chicago PD must have been cruising nearby. Tommy surrendered the moment he heard them, dropping the gun like it burned him and sinking to his knees, hands behind his head in the practiced motion of someone who'd watched too many police shows. "I'm sorry," he kept saying over and over, as 2 officers cuffed him. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." His face was fully visible now, the mask discarded on the floor like shed skin. Tears streaked his cheeks. "My daughter. My daughter needs." His voice broke completely. "Save it for booking," one officer said, not unkindly, as they led him toward the patrol car. Cassidy watched from her position near booth 2, still standing, her legs trembling so badly she thought she might collapse. The mother she'd shielded was crying quietly, holding her daughter close, whispering "thank you" over and over until the words lost meaning. Detective Sarah Carter arrived 10 minutes later, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with graying hair and the permanent squint of someone who spent too much time reading reports in dim light. She separated everyone for statements, starting with Marcus. "Mr. Whitfield, walk me through what happened." Cassidy couldn't hear everything, but she watched. Marcus's body language was controlled, his voice measured, his hands shook when he gestured. Not the slight tremor from before. This was pronounced, violent almost, like his body was betraying emotions his face refused to show. Know him from community outreach work. Whitfield Foundation sponsors a reentry program for people struggling with employment. Recognized his voice, thought I could de-escalate. It was a beautiful story. Philanthropist recognizes troubled youth from his charitable work, risks his life to prevent violence. The kind of story that would play perfectly on the evening news. Except Tommy's eyes as the officers led him past Marcus held something that wasn't gratitude or shame. They held betrayal, and Marcus wouldn't meet his gaze. When Detective Carter called Cassidy over, she gave the basic facts. She was serving coffee. The man entered. She moved to protect the mother and child. Marcus intervened. The suspect surrendered. "Did you recognize the perpetrator?" Carter asked. Cassidy's mouth went dry. The detective's eyes were too sharp, too knowing. "No," she heard herself say. "I've never seen him before." The lie tasted like ash. Detective Carter nodded, made a note, moved on to the next witness. Cassidy returned to the staff room, sat on the bench, and stared at her hands. They were still shaking. 3 years ago, her mind whispered. She was Cassidy Morgan, senior associate at Dawson and Pierce, sitting in her office at 10 p.m. reviewing case file 847. Thomas Brennan versus Whitfield Capital Management. Tommy had hired their firm on contingency after Whitfield capital-backed developers systematically destroyed his small construction business. The pattern was elegant in its cruelty. Award contracts, demand work, begin immediately, then refuse payment citing fabricated quality issues. By the time Tommy could sue, he'd already paid for materials, labor, and permits out of pocket. He lost everything. Cassidy had found the proof. Internal emails showing the scheme was deliberate, targeting small contractors who couldn't afford extended legal battles. She'd been ready to file for trial. Then her senior partner called her into his office. "Drop the Brennan case. We have them." The emails prove. Drop it, Cassidy. Whitfield Foundation donates $500,000 annually to this firm's pro bono fund. That money helps hundreds of people. One contractor's grudge isn't worth sacrificing that. One contractor's grudge? They destroyed his livelihood. Drop it. That's final. She refused. Went over his head to the managing partners. They smiled, agreed to review the case, and 48 hours later, Tommy's case was mysteriously settled for $15,000. Enough to make the lawsuit go away. Not enough to actually help him. Cassidy was encouraged to resign 3 weeks later. She never found out what happened to Tommy after that. Never wanted to know. It hurt too much knowing she'd failed him. Now, sitting in Sterling's diner staff room at 10:47 p.m., Cassidy knew exactly what had happened to Tommy. He'd been desperate enough to point a gun at strangers for money. And Marcus Whitfield, the man who'd just been hailed as a hero, was the reason why. Cassidy just made a choice in that moment. She stayed silent when Detective Carter asked if she recognized Tommy. Before we continue, I need to know, was she right to stay quiet and investigate on her own, or should she have told the detective everything she knew? Your answer reveals something about your relationship with authority and justice. Drop it below. Saturday morning arrived cold and unforgiving. Cassidy stood in front of her storage unit in South Chicago, the worn leather portfolio in her hands feeling heavier than it should. She hadn't opened it in 18 months. Part of her had hoped she'd never need to again. The portfolio's leather was cracked at the corners, the brass clasp tarnished. Inside, organized with the precision that had once made her an exceptional attorney, were 47 case files. Each one represented someone she couldn't save. Each one a failure that eventually drove her out of law. Case file 847 was third from the bottom. Thomas Michael Brennan versus Whitfield Capital Management and Associated Entities. She spread the documents across her kitchen table, and Tommy's story reconstructed itself in legal briefs and evidence exhibits. Tommy had owned Brennan Construction, a small outfit, just him and 5 employees, specializing in residential renovations. In 2019, Whitfield Capital-backed developers had approached him with a massive contract, gut renovation of 12 brownstones in Lincoln Park. Project value, $2.8 million. Tommy's cut, $340,000. He'd been thrilled. It was the kind of contract that could transform a small business into a sustainable enterprise. The contract terms were complex, 70 pages of legal language that Tommy signed because he trusted that business people operated in good faith. They didn't. Cassidy's notes from 3 years ago laid out the scheme with clinical precision. Predatory contract structure. Payment milestone triggers designed to be impossible to meet. Quality standards undefined, allowing subjective rejection of work. Dispute resolution clause requires arbitration in Whitfield-friendly venue. Timeline penalties accumulate daily, but never disclosed until after work completed. Tommy had completed the work. All 12 brownstones finished on schedule. Then Whitfield's developers claimed quality issues, minor cosmetic concerns blown into major defects. They refused payment, demanded Tommy fix problems at his own expense. When he pushed back, they threatened legal action for breach of contract. By the time Tommy hired Cassidy's firm, he'd already paid $280,000 for materials and labor out of his savings and business loans. The stress had destroyed his marriage. His wife left, taking their daughter Emma. Then, 3 weeks into the legal fight, Emma was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. She was 7 years old. The medical bills were catastrophic. Tommy's insurance, a bare-bones policy small business owners carried because they couldn't afford better, denied coverage for the experimental treatment Emma needed, claiming it was investigational. Cost, $340,000, the exact amount Whitfield Capital owed him. Cassidy remembered Tommy sitting in her office, his hands shaking as he showed her photos of Emma in the hospital, bald from chemotherapy, smiling despite everything. "I just need what they owe me," he'd said. "I just need to save my daughter." They'd been 48 hours from trial when her senior partner killed the case. Cassidy closed the file while rising in her throat. She pulled out her phone and called the one person who might still talk to her from her old legal life. Jennifer Wu answered on the third ring. "Cassidy, I heard about the robbery. Are you okay? I need information." "Thomas Brennan. What happened after his case settled?" A long pause. "You don't know? Tell me." "His daughter's in critical condition. Chicago Memorial Pediatric Oncology. The experimental treatment she needed 3 years ago? She never got it. They tried standard chemo, but the cancer came back aggressive last year. There's a new treatment now, CAR T-cell therapy, but insurance won't cover it. Cost is $50,000 out of pocket." Cassidy's hand tightened on the phone. "The robbery. That's why." He was desperate, Cass. The doctors gave Emma 3 months, maybe 4. That money he tried to steal, it wouldn't have even covered half of what she needs. After hanging up, Cassidy spent 6 hours cross-referencing her old case files with public records. The pattern emerged like a mathematical proof, elegant and damning. 12 contractors, 12 predatory contracts, all between 2018 and 2022, all through Whitfield capital-backed development projects. Combined losses, $4.3 million. Marcus Whitfield's net worth had grown by $180 million during the same period. She photographed every document, uploaded them to an encrypted cloud drive, and made 3 separate backup copies. Then she sat back and stared at the evidence that could destroy one of Chicago's most powerful men. The question was, what was she going to do with it? Marcus Whitfield stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, 43 floors above Chicago's financial district, watching the city lights blur in the morning rain. His phone buzzed for the 15th time that hour. His attorney, Gerald Rothman, had called at 7 a.m. The police investigation is routine. You're a witness and a victim, essentially. Media coverage is overwhelmingly positive. Billionaire risks life to stop armed robbery. Your foundation's donation page has seen a 40% spike. We should capitalize on this. Marcus had hung up without responding. Now at 9:30 a.m., James Park stood in his office doorway. James had been his COO for 8 years, a Harvard MBA with an uncomfortable habit of asking questions Marcus preferred to avoid. "The board wants a statement about the incident," James said. "PR drafted something, but I wanted to run it by you first." "Fine." Marcus. James closed the door. "How did you know his name?" "What?" "The robber. You called him Tommy. How did you know his name?" Marcus kept his eyes on the window. "I told the police. He participated in one of our foundation's reentry programs. I manage the foundation. We don't have a reentry program." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. "He worked for me," Marcus said finally. 15 years ago. Small contractor on the Wicker Park development project. The one that made your first $50 million. "Yes. And you remembered his name after 15 years? Marcus turned to face his COO. "What are you really asking, James?" James met his gaze without flinching. "I'm asking if there's something I need to know before this becomes a problem." Before Marcus could answer, his phone lit up with a news alert. Chicago Tribune, attempted robbery suspect's daughter fighting for life. Community rallies for medical fund. The article included a photo of Tommy's daughter, Emma. Even through the hospital bed and medical equipment, she was beautiful. Dark eyes, gentle smile. 7 years old in the photo. 10 now. The article detailed her condition. Leukemia, critical stage, experimental treatment needed. GoFundMe page started by hospital staff that had raised $8,000 of the $50,000 goal. Marcus stared at the photo. For a moment, just a moment, he felt something crack in his chest. A little girl was dying because her father couldn't pay for treatment. Her father couldn't pay because Marcus had destroyed his business through contract terms designed to be unwinnable. 15 years ago, Tommy Brennan had been 28, energetic, honest to a fault. He'd submitted a bid for the Wicker Park renovation that was $200,000 less than the next competitor. Marcus, then a junior developer trying to make his first major deal, had hired him immediately. Then Marcus's mentor had pulled him aside. "Kid, you want to make real money in this business? It's not about the deal you make. It's about the deals you enforce. Build contracts that let you control the outcome." Marcus had paid a high-priced attorney $50,000 to draft contracts with hidden clauses and impossible standards. Tommy completed the work beautifully. Marcus refused final payment, citing fabricated defects. Tommy couldn't afford to fight. He lost $85,000. That money became Marcus's down payment on his next property. That property became 5 properties. Those 5 became 50. Tommy Brennan's loss was the foundation Marcus Whitfield's empire was built on. Marcus closed the news article, locked his phone. The moment of remorse passed. It always did. "James, draft a public statement. Whitfield Foundation will donate $10,000 to the girls' GoFundMe." Good optics. That's not even a quarter of what she needs. It's generous enough to look good without setting precedent. And James, Marcus's voice dropped. "Stop asking questions about things that don't concern you." After James left, Marcus pulled open his desk drawer. Inside, beneath files and business cards, was a photo he kept hidden from everyone. His daughter, Sophia, at her high school graduation. She was 24 now. She hadn't spoken to him in 7 years. The last thing she'd said, "You destroy people, Dad. You just destroy them and call it success." He closed the drawer. His phone buzzed again. His PR director. "Media requests coming in. Morning shows want interviews. This is excellent brand positioning." Marcus typed back, "Accept them all." A little girl was dying. His public image had never been better. These 2 facts existed simultaneously in his mind without apparent contradiction. That's what 7 years of therapy still couldn't fix. 3 days later, Cassidy was back at work. She considered not returning. The trauma of having a gun pointed at her face, the weight of what she knew about Tommy and Marcus, the impossibility of serving coffee while carrying evidence that could topple an empire. But rent was still due. Her bank account still read $347.18, and hiding accomplished nothing. So she tied her apron, pinned back her hair, and returned to Sterling's diner like nothing had changed. Except everything had changed. At 9:30 p.m., the exact time he'd arrived before the robbery, Marcus Whitfield walked through the door. Ruby tensed behind the counter. Miguel dropped a plate, the crash echoing through the suddenly quiet diner. Every customer who'd been there Friday night looked up, remembering. Marcus walked directly to table 3, sat down, waited. Ruby gestured frantically at Cassidy. "Don't go over there. Let someone else take it." Cassidy picked up her notepad and walked to his table. "Black coffee?" she asked, her voice steady. Marcus looked up, and she saw something new in his eyes. Not the distraction from before. Not the businessman's assessment. This was calculation. "Actually," he said quietly, "I was hoping we could speak privately. Just for a moment. The manager's office, perhaps?" Every instinct screamed at her to refuse. Instead, she heard herself say, "Ruby, can we use the back office?" Ruby's eyes went wide, but she nodded. The office was small. A desk, 2 chairs, filing cabinets. The lingering smell of Ruby's vanilla air freshener. Marcus closed the door. The click of the latch sounded final. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Set it on the desk between them. "There's $10,000 in there. Cash. For your trauma. For what you went through." Cassidy didn't touch it. "I don't want your money. I'm also prepared to offer an additional $5,000 if you'd sign this. He produced a document. It's a standard non-disclosure agreement. Simple terms: you don't discuss the incident with media. I compensate you for your distress. You're trying to buy my silence. I'm trying to fairly compensate someone who suffered because of a criminal's actions. His voice was smooth, practiced. The media has been relentless. I prefer this incident not follow me or you for years to come. Cassidy picked up the NDA, scanned it with the speed of someone who'd reviewed thousands of legal documents. This doesn't just cover the robbery. This covers any and all interactions, observations, or knowledge regarding Marcus Whitfield or associated business entities. That's remarkably broad. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Standard legal language. No, it's not. She set down the document. You're not here because of the robbery. You're here because you think I know something. I don't know what you mean. Thomas Brennan. Case file 847. Wrongful contract termination lawsuit against Whitfield Capital Management. Filed August 2019. Settled under suspicious circumstances 48 hours before trial. October 2021. Marcus went very still. I was his attorney, Mr. Whitfield. Well, one of them. Before my firm was pressured to drop his case. Before I was encouraged to resign for refusing to participate in that pressure. He stopped. Recalculated. That's an unfortunate coincidence. There's no such thing as coincidence. You destroyed Tommy's business. His daughter got sick. Your delayed payment meant he couldn't afford her treatment. 3 years later, desperate and out of options, he walked into this diner with a gun to steal the money you stole from him first. I didn't steal anything. I operated within contractual terms. You operated within predatory contract structures designed to defraud contractors who didn't have the resources to fight back. Her voice remained calm, but her hands clenched the edge of the desk. I have the files, Marcus. All of them. 12 contractors. For $0.3 million in combined losses. Internal emails showing your development partners deliberately targeted small businesses. I have everything. Marcus's businessman facade began to crack. What do you want? Tommy's daughter needs $50,000 for treatment. You pay it today. You also compensate the other 11 contractors you destroyed. Full payment on their contracts plus interest. And you restructure your business practices with oversight. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. You wanted to give away $4 million because I used legal contracts that people voluntarily signed. Legal and ethical aren't the same thing. In business, they're the only thing. He stood, buttoning his jacket. Here's what you don't understand. What I did wasn't illegal. Aggressive? Yes. Ruthless? Absolutely. But every contract was reviewed by attorneys. Every clause was enforceable. Tommy Brennan signed documents he didn't read carefully enough. That's not fraud. That's business. His daughter's dying. His daughter's illness is a tragedy. It's not my responsibility. His voice hardened. You think you can pressure me with old case files? You're a waitress with $127,000 in student debt and an eviction notice coming in 2 weeks. Yes, I checked. I'm a billionaire with a legal team that costs more per hour than you make in a month. You have no proof of illegal activity because there wasn't any. Just aggressive business practices that courts have consistently upheld. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. You already sacrificed your legal career once for your principles, Ms. Morgan. How'd that work out for you? You're serving coffee at $2.13 an hour plus tips. Meanwhile, I'm 43 floors above the city, and the Chicago Tribune is calling me a hero. He opened the door. Stay in your lane. It's safer there. Mr. Whitfield, Cassidy said quietly. He turned back. You're right. I already lost my career once for my principles. which means I have nothing left to lose. And a person with nothing to lose? That's the most dangerous kind of opponent. Marcus's jaw tightened. You're a waitress with student debt. I'm a billionaire with lawyers. How do you think this ends? He left, the door closing behind him with decisive finality. Cassidy sat in the small office, her heart hammering, adrenaline making her hands shake. She just threatened one of Chicago's most powerful men, with evidence she had, with principles that had already cost her everything. The door opened. Ruby stood there, eyes wide, phone in her hand. I heard everything, she whispered. The door doesn't seal properly. I've been meaning to fix it for months. And Cassidy. She held up her phone. I recorded it, every word. The next morning, Cassidy woke to a text from Ruby. We need to talk. Don't come to work today. She called immediately. Ruby answered on the first ring, her voice strained. Corporate called me at 6 a.m. They're implementing budget cuts, effective immediately. I have to let go of 3 servers. You're one of them. I'm so sorry, honey. I fought them, but it's okay, Ruby. I know what this is. It's not okay. That man made a phone call and now you're... Ruby's voice cracked. This isn't right. By noon, Cassidy's financial crisis had intensified from serious to catastrophic. An eviction notice slid under her door. 30 days to vacate or face removal. Her student loan servicer called. Payments 3 months overdue, considering default proceedings. Her phone buzzed with automated texts from debt collectors. She sat on her studio apartment floor back against the wall, staring at her law degree hanging crooked above her second-hand desk. Juris Doctor, Northwestern University School of Law, summa cum laude. 3 years of law school. $127,000 in debt. A degree she couldn't use because standing up for what was right had made her unemployable in corporate law. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Jennifer Wu. Cassidy Marcus Whitfield's lawyers sent a cease and desist to every legal aid organization in Chicago. They're claiming you stole confidential client information from Dawson and Pierce. They're threatening to sue anyone who works with you for receiving stolen property. Cassidy closed her eyes. The case files were mine. I was the attorney of record. It doesn't matter. They have money and lawyers. You have principles and debt. How do you think this goes? After Jennifer hung up, Cassidy sat in silence. The afternoon light slanted through her window, illuminating dust motes and the evidence of a life falling apart. Unpaid bills on the counter, empty refrigerator, worn furniture from Goodwill. She looked at her law degree again. 3 years of her life, her entire 20s sacrificed to learning how to fight for justice. And what had it gotten her? Poverty, unemployment, threats from billionaires with legal teams. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe staying in her lane was safer. Maybe some fights couldn't be won. The knock on her door startled her. Ruby stood in the hallway, still in her manager's uniform from opening the diner. In her hands, she held her phone and a manila envelope. I need to tell you something, Ruby said, stepping inside. 7 years ago, my nephew Daniel had a small electrical contracting business. Whitfield Capital hired him for a commercial renovation project. $180,000 contract. He completed everything on time. Perfect work. They refused to pay, claimed code violations that didn't exist. Daniel couldn't afford lawyers. He lost his business, his house, his marriage. She opened the manila envelope, pulled out documents. He tried to kill himself 2 years later. He survived, but he's never been the same. Works minimum wage now, lives with me. Ruby set the documents on Cassidy's desk. Another predatory contract. Another destroyed life. That makes 13 contractors, Cassidy said quietly. When I heard Marcus threatening you in my office, when I heard him admit what he did to Tommy, I recorded every word. Ruby pulled up the audio file on her phone, pressed play. Marcus's voice crystal clear. What I did wasn't illegal. Aggressive? Yes. Ruthless? Absolutely. Tommy Brennan signed documents he didn't read carefully enough. That's not fraud. That's business. And then, you're a waitress with student debt. I'm a billionaire with lawyers. How do you think this ends? That's admissible evidence, Cassidy said, her legal mind already working. Illinois is a one-party consent state for recordings. You were part of the conversation space, even if you were outside the room. I don't care about legal technicalities, Ruby interrupted. I care that my nephew tried to die because of what that man did. I care that Tommy's daughter is dying because Marcus Whitfield values money more than human life. And I care that you're the only person brave enough to fight him. Cassidy stared at the recording, the documents, this woman who'd just handed her weapon. I was giving up, she admitted. 5 minutes ago, I was deciding to give up. You don't get to. Ruby's voice was fierce. My nephew doesn't get to give up on living. Tommy doesn't get to give up on grieving. That little girl doesn't get to give up on dying. You don't get to give up on fighting. After Ruby left, Cassidy sat at her desk and made a list with a methodical precision that had once made her an exceptional attorney. Assets: 13 contractor case files documenting predatory practices, recording of Marcus admitting to aggressive, ruthless business practices, Ruby's nephew's documented suicide attempt, Tommy's daughter's medical records pattern of systematic exploitation. Weaknesses: no direct evidence of illegal activity. Marcus has unlimited legal resources and unemployed, with massive debt cease and desist letters blocking legal aid organizations. Strategy needed: public pressure campaign. Legal roadblocks are harder to enforce with media attention. Find journalist already investigating Whitfield, build case strong enough for FBI white-collar crime division expose pattern, not individual incidents. She Googled Whitfield Capital Investigation Chicago and found her answer in the third result. Lisa Chen, investigative reporter for Chicago Public Square, had published 3 articles in the past year examining Whitfield's business practices. Cassidy emailed her. I have evidence. Can we meet? Lisa responded in 11 minutes. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Lincoln Park. Come alone. Bring everything. For the next 6 hours, Cassidy worked. She drafted a legal complaint with federal jurisdiction claims. She organized the case files chronologically. She transcribed Marcus's threats from Ruby's recording. She built a timeline showing systematic exploitation across 13 contractors for $0.5 million in losses, and 1 dead child as the inevitable result. At 11 p.m., she contacted the FBI's white-collar crime tip line, uploading preliminary evidence to their secure server. At midnight, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message: we know you met with a journalist. Back off, or the cease and desist becomes a lawsuit. You'll lose your law license permanently. Cassidy stared at the threat, and something crystallized inside her. Marcus had made a critical mistake. He'd shown he was scared, and scared people made errors. She texted back, see you soon. The Chicago Business Coalition's annual awards ceremony took place in the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and 500 of the city's most powerful business leaders in black-tie formal wear. Marcus Whitfield sat at the head table, accepting congratulations for his Humanitarian Leadership Award. The mayor was 3 seats away. A federal judge sat at the table behind him. Security was tight, press credentials carefully vetted. Lisa Chun had credentials, and she'd brought a guest. Cassidy walked into the ballroom wearing a borrowed dress and carrying nothing but her phone and Ruby's recording. She looked wildly out of place among the designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, a waitress crashing a party for billionaires. Lisa squeezed her hand. You sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Marcus's speech began at 8:45 p.m. He stood at the podium, comfortable in the spotlight, delivering the perfect blend of humility and pride. The Whitfield Foundation has contributed over $50 million to Chicago communities in the past decade. We believe success isn't measured just by profit, but by the positive impact we create. Every person deserves opportunity, dignity, and a chance to build something meaningful. Cassidy felt nausea rise in her throat. The man who'd systematically destroyed 13 small businesses was being celebrated for his philanthropy, which is why I'm proud to announce a new initiative, the Whitfield Second Chance Program, providing business mentorship and microloans to entrepreneurs facing hardship. That's when Cassidy stood up. The movement rippled through the ballroom. Heads turning, whispers starting. Security moved toward her position, but Lisa was already recording, her press credentials visible. "Mr. Whitfield," Cassidy called out, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Before you continue, I think this room deserves to hear the truth about your business practices." Marcus's eyes found her, and shock registered for half a second before his face smoothed into professional neutrality. "Miss, this is a private event. My name is Cassidy Morgan. I'm a former senior attorney at Dawson and Pierce, specializing in contract law." Her voice was steady, carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. 3 years ago, I represented Thomas Brennan in a lawsuit against Whitfield Capital Management. Mr. Brennan was a small contractor whose business was destroyed by predatory contract structures deliberately designed to defraud him of $340,000. Security guards approached, but the room was too silent, too many eyes watching. They hesitated. Tommy's daughter was diagnosed with leukemia the same month Whitfield Capital refused payment. She needed experimental treatment that cost exactly what your company owed him. He never got to pay for it. 4 days ago, desperate and out of options, Tommy Brennan walked into Sterling's diner with a gun, trying to steal the money you stole from him first. The room erupted. Gasps, shocked conversations, camera phones appearing. Marcus tried to regain control. "This is a disturbed individual making unfounded." "I have documentation," Cassidy continued. 13 contractors, all destroyed by the same predatory practices. $4.5 million in combined losses over 4 years. Internal emails showing your partners deliberately targeted small businesses that couldn't afford extended legal battles. "Would you like me to read them?" "Security, please escort." "I recorded our conversation, Marcus." Ruby's voice from the back of the room. She stepped forward, phone raised. "When you threatened her, when you admitted everything." Lisa Chun was live streaming now, her news outlet's audience growing by the second. Chicago Public Square, going live from the Chicago Business Coalition Awards. We're witnessing explosive allegations against businessman Marcus Whitfield. Then James Park stood up. Marcus's COO, his right-hand man for 8 years, stood from the head table. The room went silent again. "It's all true," James said, his voice heavy. "I've been COO of Whitfield Capital for 8 years. I've witnessed these practices firsthand. I've stayed silent because I was a coward, but I can't anymore. Not after that little girl." His voice broke. "Marcus maintains offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands specifically to hide assets from damaged parties pursuing legal claims. I have access to the documentation, account numbers, transaction histories, $47 million in hidden assets." Marcus's face went white. "James, you're terminated." "Mr. Whitfield." Detective Sarah Carter stood up from a table near the center. She'd been there the whole time, apparently a guest of the police commissioner. "I'm going to need you to come with me. We have questions about your statement regarding Thomas Brennan." But before anyone could move, a young woman in police uniform stepped forward from the security detail at the door. Cassidy recognized her from the hospital photos. Not Emma, but someone who looked like her. Tommy's ex-wife. "My daughter died this morning," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Emma Brennan, 10 years old, died at 6:47 a.m. from complications of acute lymphoblastic leukemia. She needed treatment that cost $50,000. We were $42,000 short. Marcus Whitfield offered to donate $10,000 to her GoFundMe last week. For good PR, his email said. It arrived yesterday. Too late. The room was silent except for her words, each one landing like a physical blow. My ex-husband is sitting in county jail right now for trying to steal money to save her. The man who destroyed his business is standing at that podium accepting an award for humanitarian leadership, while my daughter died begging me to tell her everything would be okay. Someone in the crowd started crying. The mayor looked like he wanted to disappear. Marcus stood frozen at the podium, his carefully constructed public image disintegrating in real time. It's just business, Marcus said finally desperately. Everything I did was legal. No, it wasn't. James pulled out a tablet, held it up. These internal memos show you deliberately structured contracts to exploit legal loopholes, specifically targeting contractors with insufficient resources to fight back. You instructed developers to create false quality complaints to justify payment refusal. You use shell companies to hide asset trails. That's fraud, Marcus. That's racketeering. Ruby played the recording then, Marcus's voice filling the ballroom through her phone speaker. What I did wasn't illegal. Aggressive? Yes. Ruthless? Absolutely. You're a waitress with student debt. I'm a billionaire with lawyers. How do you think this ends? The media erupted. Camera flashes, shouted questions, reporters pushing forward. Marcus tried to speak, tried to regain control of the narrative he'd spent years carefully constructing. I built an empire. His voice cracked, desperate. I created thousands of jobs. I donated millions to charity. I followed the law. You built a graveyard. Cassidy's voice cut through his protests. 13 destroyed businesses. 7 bankruptcies. 2 suicides, 1 successful. 12 broken families. 1 dead child. That's your empire, Marcus. That's your legacy. The Chicago Business Coalition's president stood, face pale. Mr. Whitfield, in light of these allegations, we're rescinding your award effective immediately. The room erupted into chaos. Board members from Whitfield Capital huddled in urgent conversation. Lawyers appeared from nowhere, surrounding Marcus, trying to contain the damage. But it was too late. Lisa Chen's live stream had 40,000 viewers and climbing. Every major news outlet in Chicago was texting their reporters in attendance. The story was already going viral. Detective Carter moved toward Marcus, hand near her badge. Mr. Whitfield, I'm going to need you to come with me voluntarily, or I can make this official. Marcus looked around the ballroom, at the mayor avoiding his gaze, at board members distancing themselves, at the cameras capturing his humiliation, at Cassidy standing there with the evidence that was destroying him. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Marcus wasn't listening. He was staring at the woman in the borrowed dress, the waitress who'd somehow brought down his empire with nothing but principles and evidence. How? He asked, the question barely audible. You had nothing. You were nothing. Cassidy met his eyes. I was never nothing. You just never bothered to see me. Security finally reached her, but Lisa's live stream was recording everything, and any attempt to remove her now would only make it worse. The damage was complete, total, irreversible. Marcus Whitfield had walked into this ballroom as a celebrated humanitarian. He walked out in the company of detectives, his empire crumbling behind him, his carefully constructed facade destroyed by a waitress with $127,000 in debt and an unshakable moral compass. The award ceremony dissolved into chaos. Cassidy walked out through the front doors into the cold Chicago night and allowed herself one moment of tears. Not victory tears, but grief tears. For Emma, who'd never get to grow up. For Tommy, who'd lost everything. For all the invisible people destroyed by systems designed to make them disappear. Then she wiped her face, straightened her borrowed dress, and went to meet the FBI agents who'd been waiting in the lobby. She had testimony to give. 2 weeks became a media firestorm. The Chicago Tribune ran a front-page expose. Billionaire's empire built on predatory practices. 13 contractors speak out. The investigation uncovered Marcus's offshore accounts, shell companies hiding assets, and systematic exploitation targeting small businesses. Federal prosecutors reviewed the evidence Cassidy and James Park provided. Within 72 hours, Marcus Whitfield was formally charged with wire fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy to defraud. His bail was set at $10 million, which he could easily afford. But the judge imposed travel restrictions and froze his assets pending investigation. The Whitfield Capital Board of Directors held an emergency meeting. James Park presented the internal documentation he'd been compiling for months, evidence he'd been too afraid to release until Cassidy gave him the courage. The vote was unanimous. Marcus was removed as CEO and chairman. The company would establish a $15 million restitution fund for damaged contractors. It was too late for Emma Brennan, but 11 other families, contractors who'd lost businesses, homes, marriages, hope, would receive compensation. Not enough to erase the damage, but enough to rebuild. Tommy Brennan's case went before Judge Maria Gonzalez, a no-nonsense jurist known for considering context alongside law. The prosecutor acknowledged the systemic factors. Mr. Brennan committed a serious crime. But this court should consider that he was driven to desperate action by systematic exploitation that destroyed his livelihood and prevented him from saving his daughter's life. The system failed him before he failed the system. Tommy pleaded guilty to attempted armed robbery. Judge Gonzalez sentenced him to 5 years suspended, with 3 years mandatory mental health treatment and 500 hours of community service. Mr. Brennan, you endangered lives. That cannot be excused. But I also see a man destroyed by a system that protects the powerful and crushes the vulnerable. You will serve your sentence through treatment, therapy, and service. And Mr. Brennan, your daughter's death was not your fault. Tommy broke down completely. Cassidy, sitting in the gallery, cried with him. She received a phone call 3 days later from Patricia Morrison, Director of Chicago Legal Aid Coalition. Ms. Morgan, we'd like to offer you a position. Director of Contractor Advocacy and Small Business Protection. We're launching a new division specifically to combat predatory business practices. Salary is $62,000. It's not corporate law money. It's perfect, Cassidy said immediately. When do I start? Yesterday, ideally. We have 17 contractors who've contacted us since your story broke. The salary was modest, barely enough to handle her student loans and rent. But it was enough, and more importantly, it was meaningful. On a gray Thursday afternoon, Cassidy visited Tommy at the Northbrook Behavioral Health Center, where he was beginning court-mandated treatment. He looked hollowed out. Grief had carved away everything that was essential. But he was clean, sober, attending daily therapy, trying to survive a loss that should have killed him. I don't know how to thank you, he said, his voice rough. You lost your job, risked everything. You don't need to thank me. I'm sorry I couldn't do this 3 years ago. I'm sorry about Emma. Tommy's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to be a veterinarian. She loved animals. Even though we could never afford pets, she'd bring home injured birds, try to fix them. His voice broke. She never got to save anything. She saved you, Cassidy said quietly. You're here, getting help, trying to heal. That's what she'd want. Some days I'm not sure I want it. I know, but you keep going anyway. That's what healing looks like. Marcus Whitfield's pre-trial proceedings moved forward. His daughter, Sophia, appeared in the news. She'd released a statement through her attorney. "I have not spoken to my father in 7 years due to his business practices and moral failures. I will not be providing character testimony on his behalf. I hope the families he harmed receive justice." Even his daughter had abandoned him. Marcus awaited trial in his penthouse, ankle monitor tracking his every movement, watching his empire dissolve. His foundation's board resigned en masse. His philanthropic awards were rescinded. His business partners distanced themselves, claiming they'd had no knowledge of his practices, which was probably true, because Marcus had been very good at hiding what he was. He sat alone in the penthouse he'd bought with money stolen from people like Tommy Brennan, and for the first time in his adult life, he had no way to escape the consequences of his choices. Justice looked different than Cassidy had imagined. It wasn't clean or complete. Emma was still dead. Tommy was still broken. 12 other contractors still carried the scars of what Marcus had done. But there was accountability. There was change. There were 11 families who could rebuild. And there was a new director of contractor advocacy who understood exactly how the powerful destroyed the vulnerable, because she'd seen it from both sides. Cassidy Morgan hung her law degree in her new office at Chicago Legal Aid Coalition, right next to a photo of Emma Brennan smiling in a hospital bed. She got back to work. Cassidy Morgan's journey from attorney to waitress to advocate took 3 years and cost her everything. Twice. She lost her career for standing up to power. She lost her job for refusing to stay silent. She risked her future to expose a system designed to protect billionaires and crush workers. But here's what I didn't tell you at the beginning. This is story number 7 in my Hidden Power Investigation series. Over the past 18 months, I've documented 47 cases of service workers with hidden expertise. People society trains us to treat as invisible, who are actually the most powerful people in the room. Janitors who speak 6 languages, security guards with PhDs, delivery drivers who were once surgeons, waitresses who are attorneys building cases that will topple empires. These are the people who see everything, know everything, and are consistently underestimated because we judge competence by appearance and wealth by job title. This channel exists to tell their stories, to prove that invisible people deserve to be seen. If you've watched this far, you understand why this matters. You understand that power isn't about wealth or position. It's about refusing to be silenced when silence makes you complicit. I need you to subscribe. YouTube only shows my videos to engage subscribers now, and these stories need to reach people. And drop below. What hidden expertise do you have that your job title doesn't show? What skill, knowledge, or experience do people consistently underestimate about you? I read every comment. Your story might be next. Also, if this story moved you, hit the like button. We're building a community of 500,000 people who believe everyone deserves dignity, justice, and the chance to be seen. Let's get there together. 6 months later, Cassidy's organization had recovered $4.2 million for exploited contractors across Illinois. The legislation she'd helped draft, requiring transparent contract terms and independent arbitration for disputes under $500,000, was moving through the state Senate. Marcus Whitfield's trial was scheduled for November. His legal team was mounting a vigorous defense, but the evidence was overwhelming. Sophia still wouldn't speak to him. Tommy Brennan returned to construction work part-time, with a contractor who understood trauma and gave him space to grieve. He attended therapy 3 times a week. He'd established the Emma Brennan Memorial Scholarship Fund for children of struggling contractors. It had raised $180,000 so far. Cassidy worked 16-hour days and still barely made rent. But she chose this. She chose service to others not as hiding, but as justice. On a Tuesday afternoon, she received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a check for $50,000 made out to Emma's scholarship fund. No signature, but the postmark read, Metropolitan Correctional Center, Chicago. Marcus Whitfield, awaiting trial, had sent money from his frozen assets. Not redemption, not forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of accountability. Cassidy deposited the check. 13 more contractors needed help, and she had work to do. Power isn't about wealth or position. It's about refusing to be silenced when silence makes you complicit. Her law degree hung in her office, next to photos of 23 contractors she'd helped. She was just getting started.